Sometimes in life we find ourselves sitting in the middle of a story we never wanted to be in, holding pieces we never thought would break, asking questions we never thought we would have to ask. We try to be strong, but deep down we wonder if what we have lost will ever make sense, if the pain we've endured will ever have a purpose. And maybe today you've walked in here or tuned in, feeling tired, feeling unseen, maybe even feeling forgotten by God. But I want to tell you something, not as empty comfort, not as a nice phrase to hang on a wall, but as a truth that is alive and breathing in heaven right now. God is about to make sense of everything that broke you. He has been watching, He has been working, and He has been weaving something behind the scenes that you cannot yet see. Nothing has slipped through His fingers, not one tear, not one heartbreak, not one sleepless night has gone unnoticed. If you'll lean in, if you'll listen with both your heart and your spirit, you're going to hear something today that could shift the way you see your entire journey. You'll begin to realize that the breaking didn't bury you, it planted you. That what felt like the end was actually the setup for a new beginning. And before this moment is over, I believe you'll sense it in your spirit. That God's hand has been on you the whole time. And the day is coming when you will understand why it had to happen the way it did. So stay with me, because by the end of this message, I believe hope is going to rise in you again. You're going to find yourself believing, maybe for the first time in a long time, that your story isn't over. And the best chapters haven't even been written yet. When life breaks you, it rarely feels like there is any purpose behind the pain. The human heart aches for meaning when it is wounded, but in the moment all you can see is the loss, the disappointment, or the betrayal. Yet for those who belong to God, there is an unshakable truth. Nothing that touches your life is meaningless in His hands. The same God who spoke the universe into being, who set the boundaries for the seas and called the stars by name, is the one who has allowed certain storms to pass through your life. This is not because He delights in watching you suffer, but because He is weaving something through that pain that you cannot yet see. He is the God who wastes nothing. Every tear, every sleepless night, every unanswered question becomes part of a divine story that is still unfolding. Pain often feels like a thief, taking joy, taking peace, taking security. But in God's design, pain can also be a teacher, shaping the soul in ways comfort never could. There are lessons we learn in the valley that we could never discover on the mountaintop. We discover His faithfulness in the fire, His nearness in the darkness, and His strength when our own has run out. When you are broken, you begin to realize just how much you need the one who holds all things together. Or who holds all things together? Or who holds all things together? And who were all things? And in that realization, your faith grows roots that cannot be shaken by the winds of circumstance. God's ways are higher than ours, and that means there will be times when we cannot trace His hand, but we can trust His heart. Scripture tells us that all things work together for the good of those who love Him. Not just the good moments, not just the victories, but all things, including the heartbreaks, the failures, and the seasons we would rather erase from memory. This is the mystery of walking with God. He can take what was meant for evil and use it for good. He can take the very thing that was designed to destroy you and turn it into the thing that strengthens you. The refining process is rarely comfortable, but gold is not purified without fire, and diamonds are not formed without pressure. In the same way, a believer's faith is not perfected without trials. Sometimes the breaking is not punishment, it is preparation. God allows certain cracks in the walls we have built around ourselves, because He knows those walls are keeping His light from shining fully through us. Brokenness, in His hands, becomes the very thing that makes us whole. Looking back, many can testify that the seasons they thought would end them actually became the seasons that defined them. The prayers that felt unanswered at the time were actually answered in ways far better than they could have imagined. The loss that seemed unbearable became the doorway to a deeper intimacy with God. Pain with a purpose is never wasted. And when you belong to Him, nothing in your story is accidental. He is the Redeemer, and redemption is not just about saving souls. It is about restoring every broken chapter, rewriting every painful page, and proving that He can bring beauty from the ashes. God is about to make sense of everything that has broken you. And when He does, you will see that what felt like the end was only the beginning of a testimony that will glorify His name and strengthen the faith of others who are still in the middle of their own storms. One of the hardest things for the human heart to accept is that God's timing is not our timing. We live in a world that craves instant answers, immediate resolutions, and quick fixes, but the kingdom of God operates on an entirely different rhythm. There are moments when we cry out for understanding and heaven seems silent. We want clarity now, healing now, breakthrough now, yet God often works in seasons, not seconds. His timing carries a wisdom that sees the whole story, not just the page we are on. He is never in a hurry, and yet He is never late. The delay is not a sign of neglect. It is a sign of intentionality. Every moment you are waiting is a moment He is weaving together countless threads that will one day form the tapestry of His perfect plan for you. We often think if we could just get the answer now, we could move forward in peace. But God knows that premature answers can be as damaging as delayed ones. Sometimes the reason He holds back the explanation is because we are not yet in the place to understand it. Sometimes our hearts need to be healed before they can handle the truth. Sometimes the people, opportunities, and resources necessary for the fulfillment of His plan are still being prepared. His timing is about alignment, aligning your heart, your character, your circumstances, and even the people around you, so that when the moment comes, everything fits together in a way that reveals His glory. When God delays, He is not ignoring your prayers. He is protecting your destiny. There are blessings that, if they arrive too early, would crush you instead of bless you. There are doors that, if they opened before you were ready, would become a trap instead of a pathway. We cannot see these things in the moment because our vision is limited, but His vision spans eternity. The waiting may feel like a waste, but in God's design it is often the most productive season of your life. He uses the waiting to build your trust, deepen your faith, and teach you to rely on Him instead of your own understanding. The Bible is filled with examples of God's people having to endure seasons of waiting before His promises came to pass. Abraham waited decades for the promised son. Joseph waited years in slavery and prison before he saw the dream fulfilled. David waited through battles, betrayals, and wilderness years before sitting on the throne God had chosen for him. In every case, the delay was not wasted. It was shaping them, preparing them, and positioning them for the fullness of what God had in store. What looked like stagnation was actually divine preparation. We live in a culture that sees delay as failure, but heaven sees it as formation. Every moment you spend trusting Him in the unknown becomes a testimony of faith that will one day encourage someone else. One day, when His plan unfolds, you will realize that every unanswered question, every closed door, and every long night of prayer was part of a story that could not have been written any other way. When God moves, it will be in such a way that you will not have to force it, manipulate it, or strive for it. It will happen with the kind of divine ease that makes it clear it was His doing from the very beginning. And when that moment arrives, you will see that the waiting was never a waste. It was the very thing that made the blessing possible. When something in life shatters, the natural instinct is to see it as the end. We stand over the pieces, unable to imagine how they could ever come together again. But God is the master of redemption. And redemption does not only mean forgiving sins, it means taking the broken pieces of your story and turning them into something beautiful and purposeful. In the hands of an artist, broken glass can become a mosaic, each fragment catching the light in a way it never could have when it was whole. In the same way, when you surrender your brokenness to God, He arranges those pieces into a testimony that reflects His glory more powerfully than an unbroken life ever could. There is a depth and richness that comes from lives that have been through breaking and have allowed God to do the rebuilding. The cracks and scars do not disqualify you. They become the very places where His grace shines through. It is often the people who have been most deeply wounded who have the greatest capacity for compassion, the ones who have endured the fiercest storms who can speak peace into the storms of others. What the enemy intended to use to silence you becomes the very thing God uses to give your voice authority. God's way of redeeming broken pieces is not simply putting things back the way they were. He makes them better, stronger, and more meaningful. The life you have after He redeems you may look different from the one you imagined, but it will be richer in ways you could never have planned. Sometimes the breaking is what allows you to be rebuilt on a stronger foundation. Sometimes it is the only way to strip away what was false, fragile, or temporary, so that what remains is eternal. God is not just restoring what you lost, He is shaping something that will last beyond this life. The process of redemption often begins when we stop trying to glue the pieces back together in our own strength and instead place them in His hands. It is humbling to admit we cannot fix ourselves, but that humility is often the gateway to deeper intimacy with God. In those moments, we discover that His love for us is not diminished by our brokenness. If anything, it becomes more tangible. He does not look at the mess and see something beyond repair. He sees the raw material for a masterpiece. The Bible is full of stories of God redeeming broken pieces. Ruth's life seemed shattered by loss, yet God wove her story into the lineage of the Messiah. Peter's confidence was broken when he denied Christ, yet God used him to lead the early church. Paul's life was a trail of destruction before his encounter with Jesus, yet God redeemed those pieces to make him one of the greatest witnesses of the gospel. Each of these lives reminds us that no matter how fractured our story feels, God's hands are capable of creating something purposeful from it. When God redeems broken pieces, the end result is not just for your benefit, it becomes a blessing to others. Your testimony carries hope to those who are still standing in the ruins, wondering if they will ever see light again. You become living proof that there is no wound too deep, no mistake too big, and no life too damaged for God to restore. The breaking does not have the final say. Redemption does. And when He is finished, you will be able to look at what once caused you pain and see not just the cracks, but the beauty of how He put it all together for His glory. We often judge life by what we can see and feel in the moment, and when pain comes, it is easy to believe that it is the end of the story. From our limited view, loss feels final, disappointment feels permanent, and brokenness feels beyond repair. But God does not see as we see. He is not bound by the moment we are in. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once. What we see as the end, He sees as a turning point. What we think is destruction, He sees as construction for something far greater than we can imagine. This difference in perspective changes everything. If we could see what He sees, we would trust more and fear less. God's view is complete, ours is partial. We stand close to the canvas of our lives, only able to see brushstrokes that make no sense up close. He stands back and sees the entire masterpiece taking shape. The storm you are in now might be the very thing that clears the way for the blessing you have been praying for. The unanswered prayer that frustrates you today may be the very protection that saves you tomorrow. From His perspective, nothing is wasted, nothing is random, and nothing is outside the reach of His control. Every detail is accounted for, even the ones that seem to you like detours or disasters. This is why faith is so essential. Faith trusts the artist even when the picture is unfinished. Faith believes there is meaning even when the moment feels meaningless. Faith holds on to the promises of God when every visible sign seems to contradict them. It is the confidence that the author of your story is good, that He knows exactly where He is taking you, and that every chapter will serve a purpose. We cannot always see the beauty in the ashes while the fire is still burning. But God sees the beauty before the first spark even falls. Many times, what breaks us is the very thing that positions us for God's best. Think of Joseph in the pit and then the prison. He could not have known that those low places were leading him to the palace. Think of the disciples watching Jesus die on the cross. They could not have imagined that the very act they thought was the end was actually the greatest victory in history. Our perspective is tied to time. God's perspective is tied to eternity. That is why He can allow what feels like a crushing blow to become the foundation for a greater purpose. When you can begin to align your view with His, you stop panicking in the middle of the process. You stop declaring endings where God is only beginning. You start to see delays as preparation, closed doors as protection, and struggles as shaping. You learn to trust that He is working even when the evidence is hidden. The pain may still hurt, but it no longer owns you, because you understand that there is a bigger story unfolding. One day you will look back at the moments that confused and hurt you the most and see them through God's eyes. You will see how they connected, how they built your character, how they positioned you for blessings you could not have reached otherwise. You will understand that the middle of the story is never the place to judge the ending. And when you finally see it from His perspective, you will realize that He was never absent, never careless, and never without a plan, even in the seasons that broke you. Brokenness is often something we try to avoid at all costs. We see it as weakness, as failure, or as evidence that something has gone terribly wrong. But in the hands of God, brokenness can become the very tool that shapes the strongest parts of who we are. When life breaks us, it has a way of stripping away pride, self-reliance, and illusions of control. It forces us to face the reality that our strength is not enough, and that we desperately need the One who never breaks. In that surrender, something powerful happens. Our faith deepens, our vision clears, and our dependence on God becomes unshakable. This is where many of the greatest men and women of God were shaped through seasons of breaking. Moses was broken in the wilderness before he was ready to lead Israel out of Egypt. Hannah was broken in her barrenness before she could dedicate Samuel to the Lord. Even Peter, who walked with Jesus, had to face the breaking of his own pride when he denied the Lord 3 times before becoming the bold leader of the early church. In each case, the breaking was not a sign of God's rejection, it was a sign of His preparation. It was a refining fire, a necessary step to shape them for the calling ahead. When God allows breaking, it is not to destroy you, but to prepare you for a weight you could not carry before. Blessings carry weight, influence carries weight, and calling carries weight. If your character is not ready to bear that weight, it can crush you. The breaking season builds spiritual muscle and resilience that comfort never could. It teaches you how to stand when everything around you is shaking, how to praise when nothing makes sense, and how to trust when you cannot see the way forward. These are lessons that cannot be learnt in ease. They are learned in the struggle. Brokenness also creates compassion. When you have walked through pain, you become tender toward others who are hurting. You no longer judge their tears because you know what it feels like to weep. You do not dismiss their questions because you have wrestled with your own. This kind of compassion cannot be manufactured. It is formed in the quiet, painful places where God meets you in your need. It makes you a vessel He can use to comfort others with the same comfort you have received from Him. Strength through breaking is not about becoming harder or more closed off. It is about becoming anchored. It is the kind of strength that does not depend on circumstances because it is rooted in the unchanging nature of God. You learn to stand not because life is easy, but because you know who holds you. You learn that even in your weakest moments, His grace is sufficient and His power is made perfect in weakness. And when you emerge from that breaking season, you do so with a strength that is not your own, a strength that comes from the Spirit of God dwelling within you. In the end, the breaking does not define you, the strengthening does. The season that once felt like it was crushing you becomes the very foundation you stand on. What the enemy thought would destroy you becomes the testimony that carries you into your next season. And when people look at you, they will not just see someone who survived, they will see someone who has been refined, strengthened, and made ready for every good work God has prepared in advance for you to do. There will come a moment when everything you have walked through, every unanswered question, every confusing season, and every heartbreak will suddenly begin to make sense. Right now, it may feel like your life is a collection of disconnected events, some joyful, some painful, and some that seem completely random. But God has been present in each moment. weaving a story that is far bigger than you can see. The coming clarity will not just be about understanding your past. It will be about recognizing God's fingerprints in every detail, even in the moments you thought He was absent. In the present, pain has a way of clouding our vision. It is hard to see God's hand when tears blur our eyes. It is difficult to believe there is purpose when everything feels like chaos. But God is not a God of confusion. He is a God of order. And at the right time, He will bring the pieces together. What felt unfair will be revealed as part of His protection. What felt like loss will be seen as the path to a greater gain. What felt like silence will be remembered as the time He was working in ways you could not yet comprehend. This moment of clarity may not happen all at once. Sometimes God gives glimpses, small moments when you begin to see why a door closed, why a relationship ended, why a dream was delayed. Other times, the revelation comes like a flood, and everything that once felt heavy lifts as you see the purpose behind it. In either case, it is a moment when your heart shifts from asking why to declaring, "Now I understand." And when that understanding comes, it changes not only how you see your past, but how you face your future. The Bible reminds us that one day we will see fully, even as we are fully known. Right now we see in part, like looking through a dim mirror, but there is a promise that the day will come when we will see the full picture clearly. For some things, that clarity will come in this life. For others, it will only come in eternity. But whether it comes now or later, the certainty remains. God has never wasted a single moment of your journey. Every trial, every delay, every disappointment has been a thread in the beautiful tapestry He has been weaving. When the clarity comes, gratitude will overflow. You will look back at the very things that once broke you and thank God for them, because you will see how they built you, shaped you, and drew you closer to Him. You will realize that what you thought was the enemy's victory was actually part of God's rescue. You will see that the seasons you thought were wasted were the seasons that prepared you most for your calling, and this understanding will give you courage for the days ahead. You will no longer fear the unknown, because you will know that even when you cannot see the whole plan, God can. You will walk in peace, not because life is predictable, but because you have learned that God's plans are always good, even when they pass through pain. That is the gift of coming clarity. It turns confusion into confidence, despair into hope, and brokenness into beauty. And when that moment arrives, you will know deep within your soul that God has been faithful every step of the way, and that every single thing you went through had a purpose that was worth it. In the journey of faith, there are seasons that break us, moments that confuse us, and valleys that test every ounce of our trust in God. But through every part of the path, one truth remains unshaken. God is faithful, and He is intentional. He does not allow pain without purpose. He does not permit breaking without a plan for restoration. He does not lead us into the wilderness without also preparing the way out. What has tried to destroy you will not have the final word, because God's word is final and His promise is sure. Every tear you have cried, every prayer you have whispered in the dark, and every burden you have carried has been seen, heard, and held by the one who holds all things together. The trials that seem to strip you of strength have actually built in you a resilience you did not know you had. The seasons that felt like delays were actually divine preparations for the blessings ahead. The moments that left you in pieces are the very materials God is using to create a testimony that will impact lives for His glory. And when His timing unfolds, the clarity you have been longing for will come, and you will look back with gratitude instead of grief. You will understand that what the enemy meant for harm, God turned into a stepping stone toward the destiny He designed for you before you were even born. God is not finished with your story. The breaking was not the end. It was the beginning of something new, something stronger, something deeper. The unanswered questions that haunt you now will one day be answered in a way that makes your heart bow in worship. And even in the seasons where you may never get all the answers, you will have something even greater. Peace that surpasses understanding, anchored in the truth that God is good and His plans for you are perfect. So take courage today. Lift your head, wipe your tears. You are not forgotten, and you are not forsaken. The God who started this work in you will be faithful to complete it. Trust Him in the breaking, trust Him in the waiting, and trust Him in the rebuilding. For soon you will see that everything you endured was worth it, because it brought you closer to Him and prepared you for what is coming next. Thank you for allowing me to share these words with you today. I do not take lightly the privilege of speaking into your heart and your faith journey. I know some of you are carrying burdens that feel too heavy and walking through seasons that feel too dark. But I want to remind you that you are not walking alone. God is with you, surrounding you with His love, holding you with His strength, and guiding you with His wisdom. My prayer is that these words have given you hope, encouraged your spirit, and reminded you that your story is still being written by the author who never fails. May you leave here today not just inspired, but deeply assured that the God who brought you this far is about to make sense of everything that has broken you. And when He does, your testimony will shine as proof that He is faithful, He is sovereign, and He is good, always.